Hey guys, tonight we're climbing aboard a creaking pirate ship in the middle of a storm, not to plunder treasure, but to try cooking dinner. You're standing in the galley, or what passes for one, trying to keep your balance as the floor tilts like a funhouse ride. There's a pot of something bubbling over, maybe porridge, maybe yesterday's stew pretending to be today's soup, and the whole place smells like salt, smoke, and feet. You're hungry. Everyone is. But the sea has other plans. The walls groan, the ropes whip, and the wood beneath your feet shudders like it's ready to splinter. You grip a slippery railing with one hand and a ladle with the other, while a crewmate slides past you, cursing the cursed rain, and asking why dinner isn't ready yet. You probably won't survive this shift. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Drop it in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the slick deck, eyes narrowed against the stinging wind, trying not to drop the tin cup clutched in your hand. The rain is sideways. The sky is just a blur of gray. You reach the galley door, barely a door, really, just a plank on a hinge that slams shut every few seconds like it's trying to catch someone's fingers. Inside, it's dark, humid, and smells like someone once tried to cook a fish using nothing but hope and desperation. This, you realize, is dinner prep during a storm. There's a small square of brick tucked in one corner of the ship, barely big enough for a fire. Smoke curls upward, trying and failing to find its way out. A pot rattles against the heat, and some anonymous stew sloshes with each roll of the ship. Someone tried to hang herbs from the ceiling once, but now they're just damp strings swaying like seaweed in a ghost story. You're not alone. The ship's cook is here, a man with a permanent scowl and eyebrows singed off from an incident involving too much rum and not enough water. He nods at you without speaking, too busy shoving coals with a bent iron poker. It's less of a kitchen, more of a slow-moving chaos pit. The fire keeps threatening to die every time the wind howls down the galley vent. The cook grumbles and swats at it like it insulted his mother. Every so often, sparks fly up and hit the beams, and someone yells, "Watch it!" in a tone that suggests this is the 10th time today. You lean against a beam, carefully, because that beam leaks, and watch as the cook tries to keep something boiling long enough to be called food. It's hard to tell what's in the pot. Some form of barley, maybe a shredded root, a piece of salted pork that's seen better years. You're pretty sure the same stew has been reboiled for the last 3 days. Each time, it gets a little stranger, a little more alive. But it's warm, and that's enough. Historians still argue whether pirates had official cooks or if the job rotated based on who lost the most recent bet. But it's clear someone always had to be near the galley fire, storm or not, or else mutiny would boil over faster than the stew. Outside, the storm rages. You can feel the ship lift and drop with each wave, like it's sighing under some great invisible weight. Thunder rolls in the distance, and lightning briefly lights up the galley like a haunted tavern. One of the lanterns swings wildly, almost hitting your head. You duck. No one notices. They're too busy trying to keep bowls upright and mouths shut. Pirates weren't exactly picky eaters, but they were particular about getting something, anything, in their bellies when the weather turned. Hunger plus nausea plus danger equals a crew ready to stab someone over a burned biscuit. The deck above groans again. Someone slips and curses. A rope snaps. And still, the cook stirs. The galley, as rough as it is the only place where heat and food meet. You suddenly appreciate how hard it must be to keep a meal from becoming a weapon. Every loose pan is a projectile. Every rolling onion is a trip hazard. And when the waves get high enough, they slosh into the lower decks, turning the galley into a soup bowl itself. There's a running joke on board: if the food doesn't knock you out, the kitchen will. But you're getting used to the rhythm now. You step left when the ship tilts right. You keep one hand on the beam, one on your cup. You learn to time your steps between splashes. The cook hands you a ladle and motions to the pot. Time to help. You give the stew a stir. It resists. There's something chewy near the bottom. You pretend not to notice. The smell is oddly comforting now, earthy, salty, a bit burned. The kind of smell that says, "This will keep you alive, but don't ask too many questions." A rat scurries by your foot. You ignore it. Cooking in a storm isn't glamorous. There are no spices, no recipes, no clean anything. But there's teamwork. There's muscle memory. There's the unspoken agreement that warm food, however suspicious, is better than none. And as you scoop out a bowl and pass it to a dripping sailor who mutters a thanks without making eye contact, you realize this ridiculous, sloshy kitchen is keeping the crew together. One sloppy spoonful at a time. You duck under a low beam, careful not to bang your forehead as you step deeper into the galley. It's not much of a tour, more of a shuffle and squint, but this is where every pirate meal began. Or ended. Usually both. The galley is little more than a cramped wooden closet wedged low in the ship's belly. It smells like brine, old grease, and vague disappointment. The ceiling is barely high enough to stand, and the floor is always just damp enough to make you wonder if you stepped in water or something worse. You probably don't want to know. The heart of this humble kitchen is the stove, or what passes for one. A slab of bricks, blackened with soot, huddles in one corner. There's usually a small fire sputtering inside, held in place by sheer pirate stubbornness and luck. No chimney to speak of, just a few makeshift vents that try, and mostly fail, to funnel smoke out. Most of it curls up to sting your eyes and cling to your clothes. Within 5 minutes, you smell like you've been slow roasting in salt pork yourself. Next to the stove, there's a shelf nailed to the wall. It holds exactly 3 things: a tin cup, a bent spoon, and a mystery jar that might have once held mustard. No labels. No guarantees. Cooking tools or whatever hasn't been lost overboard or turned into a weapon. One skillet, its handle wrapped in sailcloth to keep from burning fingers. A wooden ladle that doubles as a disciplinary tool. A pot so dented it looks like it fought in a war, and possibly won. Historians still argue whether some pirate ships had full-time cooks or if the role just fell to whoever hadn't passed out drunk the night before. Either way, the galley crew rarely had formal training. They just needed 3 qualities: basic coordination, a high tolerance for bad smells, and the ability to keep a fire alive in weather that would drown a candle. You run your hand along one of the counters. Well, it's more of a board nailed across 2 barrels. It wobbles. A chunk falls off. No one reacts. Above your head, herbs dangle on strings. Supposedly for cooking, but also partly to mask the scent of pickled fish and old socks. Bay leaves, maybe? Or just very confident seaweed. There's also the food storage, such as it is. Barrels line the back wall. Salted beef, salted pork, salted whatever. The salt does the heavy lifting, preserving everything and soaking into every bite until even your dreams taste briny. There are sacks of beans, if you're lucky. Rice on the fancier ships. And hardtack, those infamously jaw-breaking biscuits that could outlast the ship itself. Tap one on the counter and it might chip the wood. Or your teeth. When it comes to ingredients, pirates weren't choosy. They ate what they had. There were no menus. No substitutions. You either liked what was served, or you grumbled into your beard and hoped the next storm would toss something tastier aboard. The cook gives you a nod and gestures to the shelf with the ladle. You take it gingerly. It's sticky. You don't ask why. The fire sputters as someone opens the galley door. A gust of wet wind rushes in like it's looking for trouble. The stew pot wobbles. You steady it with one hand while the cook curses creatively in 3 languages. The door slams shut, trapping the warmth and the chaos inside once more. You're getting used to it. The damp. The smoke. The constant movement beneath your feet. Cooking here feels like trying to make dinner in the back of a galloping horse cart, while blindfolded, during a thunderstorm. And yet, the galley is the warmest place on the ship, both literally and figuratively. People drift through not just for food, but for comfort. To grumble. To gossip. To warm their fingers and their spirits. One sailor limps in with a bruised shin, mutters something about a crate that attacked him, and asks for something hot to drink. The cook hands him a tin of hot vinegar water. Tea, he calls it. The sailor grimaces but drinks it anyway. That's another galley trick, making the inedible seem passably edible. Adding grease to yesterday's rice to make it feel new. Dropping bits of old meat into stew to mask the smell. Reheating fish until it resembles something chewable again. Pirates didn't mind leftovers. They just didn't want to recognize them. There's no measuring here. No recipes. Just instinct and stubbornness and a deep understanding that burnt is still technically cooked. You reach into a barrel to grab a scoop of beans and something slimy brushes your hand. You withdraw quickly, glance at the cook. He shrugs. Adds flavor. Another sailor walks in, peeks in the pot, and offers you a small dried pepper. Spicy stew tonight? He grins. You drop it in. Why not? 1 pepper, 5 gallons of stew. It's mostly symbolic. At the end of the day, the galley isn't about cuisine. It's about survival. It's about making the most of nothing, feeding 50 people with the same 3 ingredients, and doing it while the world rocks like a cradle caught in a tantrum. You hand out bowls, nodding to each pirate who passes by. No thanks, no smiles. Just the silent acknowledgement that this mess of beans and salted fat is what's keeping them upright another day. The fire is sulking again. You crouch next to the galley's brick stove, watching the coals flicker with all the enthusiasm of a damp birthday candle. Rain batters the hull outside. You can hear boots thudding overhead, and the timbers groan in protest. Water is leaking in from somewhere unseen. Slow, sneaky drops that land on your collar just often enough to make you mutter. Keeping a fire going on a pirate ship, especially in bad weather, is an act of near sorcery. The stove itself is a marvel of stubborn engineering, a box of stone and brick crudely mortared together, jammed into a corner of the lower deck. It's heavy. Too heavy to move easily, which is part of the point. You need something that won't slide around when the ship lurches. Problem is, brick and mortar don't particularly like salt air or endless motion. You lift the lid on the firebox and blow. A few sparks sputter to life, encouraging, but short-lived. The wind outside changes pitch, and suddenly there's a cold gust funneling down from the vent pipe, scattering ash and sending smoke back into your face. You cough. Wipe your sleeve across your nose and sigh. Again, the cook appears beside you, holding a bundle of rope fibers and something sticky wrapped in cloth. Try this, he mutters, dropping the whole mess into the firebox. Tallow and oak shavings. Caught fire once in my boot. Figured it'd work here. You raise an eyebrow but poke the bundle with the iron poker. A reluctant flame curls up around the edges. It's not elegant, but it'll do. Historians still argue whether the brick stoves aboard pirate ships were standard equipment or improvisations added later by resourceful crews. Some ships built proper fire hearths during long port stays, mortaring bricks in place between the cargo holds. Others lashed metal braziers to the deck and hoped no one sneezed too hard. Either way, building and maintaining a working cooking fire at sea especially during a storm, was about as easy as juggling flint and gunpowder in a wind tunnel. The real danger wasn't just that the fire would go out. It was that it might spread. Open flame on a wooden ship packed with sailcloth, gunpowder, and barrels of rum? You do not want to be the pirate who set the kitchen, and by extension, the ship, on fire. That sort of mistake didn't get forgiven. It got tossed overboard. So, you watch the fire like it's a wild animal. Feed it too little, it dies. Feed it too much, it panics. It needs dry wood, which is rare. It needs airflow, which the storm keeps interrupting. It needs someone willing to babysit it while the world rocks and rolls around them. That someone, tonight, is you. You crouch beside the stove, adding one sliver of wood at a time. The fire grumbles but stays awake. Warmth begins to seep into the galley again. A little steam rises from the cooking pot, and for a moment there's peace. Until a wave hits. The ship lurches so suddenly you feel your stomach punch upward into your ribs. A mug topples. The stewpot slides a few inches, nearly tipping. You grab it with both hands, heart racing, and steady it just in time. The cook lets out a slow whistle. "She's got a temper tonight," he says, nodding upward at the storm like it's a rowdy patron in a tavern. You laugh weakly and tighten the ropes around the stove's base. It's anchored, but nothing feels permanent when the ship's doing its best impression of a seesaw in a hurricane. You glance back into the fire. Still lit. Still small. You exhale. Back in the day, some ships were equipped with what was known as a cambus, a type of iron stove more commonly found on merchant vessels. But pirates didn't always have the budget or the patience for that sort of luxury. Many made do with scavenged hearths or mobile brazier setups, lashed down with iron chains and surrounded by sand to prevent sparks from catching the deck. Not ideal. But pirates weren't exactly known for their risk-averse lifestyle. Fringe accounts even mentioned cooks using heated cannonballs to warm stew pots without flame. Whether that actually worked or was just a creative excuse for why the stew tasted like iron is still up for debate. Outside, the storm grumbles louder. Thunder rolls overhead like barrels tumbling down a staircase. The fire crackles, stubborn and small. You shield it with your body when the door slams open again. Another sailor shouting about rope lines and sails and the usual nonsense that doesn't matter nearly as much as this flickering flame. You're soaked. You're tired. And you've developed a near parental attachment to this fire. There's a rhythm to it now. You feed it a few shavings. Stir the pot. Adjust the vent. Repeat. The stew starts to bubble again. The smell of something vaguely edible rises. Not delicious. Pirate food rarely reached that level, but solid. Filling. Warm. Hopeful. You look up. The cook nods in approval and tosses you a piece of charred bread. You chew it slowly, watching the flames and pretending the crunch is intentional. By the time the next watch change comes, the fire is steady. The pot is steaming. The galley is, against all odds, almost cozy. You stand, stretch your back, and let the ship tilt you gently toward the door. There are still leaks. Still smoke. Still the threat that everything might tip into chaos at any moment. But the fire's holding, and in this storm, that's enough. You're elbow deep in a barrel of salted pork, trying not to gag. It's not the pork itself, though it's gray, stiff, and smells like a haunted smokehouse. It's what's floating alongside it. Bits of hair. Maybe a splinter. Possibly an entire toe from someone who leaned too close once. You decide not to think about it too much. Best not to look the meat in the eye, as they say. Rations. That's what you're dealing with tonight. Not fresh food, not even warm food yet. Just the base ingredients, preserved in salt, packed into barrels, and left to age like a fine mistake. The ship rolls to starboard, and you steady yourself with one hand on the barrel and the other on your increasingly queasy stomach. The galley groans. Somewhere nearby, a spoon clatters to the floor and vanishes beneath a bench. Probably gone forever. The rule on board is, if it touches the galley floor, it joins Davy Jones. You drag out a lump of pork, drop it onto the prep board, and immediately regret the sound it makes. It's somewhere between a slap and a thud, like a wet boot hitting a plank. The cook gives you a look but says nothing. He's too busy rummaging through another barrel marked beans, though what's in there may be closer to gravel. Here's the thing: pirate rations were never about pleasure. They were about survival, calories, and preservation. Fresh food was a rare treat, usually gone within the first few days of sailing. After that, it was dry goods and salt, salt, salt. Salted pork, salted beef, salted fish. Anything you could salt, you could eat 6 months later, if you were brave. Hardtack, the infamous sea biscuit, was another staple. You pick one up from the pile and give it a cautious tap against the table. Solid. Really solid. You try to break off a corner and instantly regret it. Your tooth tingles. The cook chuckles. They say if the worms in it are still moving, it's fresh, he says, as if that's helpful. You look down. There are indeed a few small, pale wiggles embedded in the hardtack's folds. You blink. Then you shrug. Protein's protein. Historians still argue whether pirate ships regularly suffered from food shortages or if the chaos of their lifestyle just made it feel that way. What's clear is that keeping food usable in a constantly wet, swaying environment was a full-time job. Spoilage, theft, rodents, and plain bad luck meant rations had to stretch, and then stretch some more. You move to a sack marked peas, though half of what spills out looks more like dust. The cook eyes it, tosses in a handful of rice for good measure, and mutters something about it all tasting the same once it's in the pot. You believe him. Above deck, the storm is still doing its best impression of an angry orchestra. Thunder rumbles, ropes slap, and the occasional shout filters down through the hatch. But here, in the galley, you're having your own battle, against texture, smell, and gravity. You grab a tin scoop and measure out just enough beans to be optimistic, but not enough to spark complaints if it turns out to be mostly pebbles. The trick, you've learned, is not to serve perfection. It's to serve consistency. The crew doesn't expect gourmet. They expect food that won't run away or kill them outright. You cut the pork. Or try to. It fights back, resisting the knife like it has unfinished business. Eventually, you manage to wrestle it into chunks, each piece the approximate size of regret. Into the pot they go, along with the beans, peas, and a suspicious onion that's somehow still here from port, soft, but technically alive. The cook adds a splash of vinegar. You nod like you understand why. Truth is, vinegar helps a lot, cuts the salt, masks the smell, keeps the crew from asking questions. It's the pirate version of hot sauce. Put enough of it in and people start to believe they're eating something interesting. A sailor stumbles in, soaked and wide-eyed. "What's for dinner?" he asks. You look at the pot. You look at the barrel. You look at the ceiling. Surprise. You say. He nods and walks away. He gets it. One of the lesser-known quirks of pirate life was the ritual around food, specifically, the lack of one. Unlike naval ships that rationed by weight, time, and rank, pirate crews often divided food communally. Everyone got more or less the same slop, though captains and quartermasters occasionally claimed the better cuts. Not that there were many better cuts on this ship. If you found a piece of pork that wasn't mostly gristle, it was a good day. You stir the pot, watching as everything begins to blend into a unified brown. That's the goal. Brown is safe. Brown means cooked. Brown means you can ladle it into a bowl and call it a meal without anyone asking what it used to be. Suddenly, the ship jerks again. This time, the barrel behind you tips slightly and lets out a gurgle. You spin, catch it, and wedge it back into place with your foot. The cook grunts in approval. Good reflexes. Last week we lost the flour that way. Took days to get the rats off the ceiling. You pretend you didn't hear that. The fire's holding. The stew's thickening. The rations are, well, they're working. And your hands are finally warming up, even if your sleeves are still damp and your socks are doing their best to pretend they're sponges. You ladle a test scoop into a tin cup and take a cautious sip. It's salty. Thick. Unapologetic. But it's hot, and it doesn't bite back. That's about as good as it gets out here. You pour another and another, handing them off to passing crew. No one thanks you. They just nod, slurp, and move on. That's pirate appreciation, not spitting it out. The barrels are closed again. The prep board's wiped-ish. And you've survived another round of ration roulette. Tomorrow, there might be fish. Or not. But tonight the crew eats. And that, oddly enough, feels like victory. Soup. It sounds so innocent, doesn't it? Back home, soup is gentle. Comforting. The kind of thing your grandmother might serve with a slice of warm bread and a pat on the head. But here, aboard a pirate ship in the middle of a storm, soup is a threat. An open challenge. A boiling liquid dare dart your back in the galley, clutching a pot with both hands while the ship rocks like it's reenacting a drunken sea shanty. The wind howls. The rain slaps the deck above. And you're standing ankle-deep in seawater that wasn't there 10 minutes ago. Tonight's assignment? Stew. Or soup. Or whatever happens when beans, pork, and stormwater decide to form a lukewarm alliance. You set the pot down on the stove with the precision of someone who's already burned themselves twice today. The fire's stubborn but awake, flickering beneath the heavy iron grate. The cook's off tending to the stores, trusting you to keep the soup from boiling over, catching fire, or developing sentience. You stir. The ladle creaks. A few beans surface, then vanish like guilty secrets. The broth sloshes dangerously with each tilt of the ship. You brace one hand on the edge of the stove and whisper a small prayer, not to Neptune, but to gravity. Soup in a storm is a strange test of skill. It's not about flavor or texture. It's about balance. Timing. Knowing exactly when to duck when the pot decides it no longer wants to participate in the cooking process. Because make no mistake, this pot will jump ship if you give it the chance. Historians still argue whether pirate stew had consistent recipes, or if it was more like an edible journal. Whatever was tossed in that day became the story. Some say onions and rice were the usual base. Others argue it was mostly water, salt, and regret. You glance into the pot. It's murky. Brownish. A suspicious slick of oil floats across the surface, shimmering in the lamplight. You squint. Is that a fish scale? Maybe. You don't remember adding fish. Then again, the last crew to handle dinner left some things ambiguous. Another wave hits. This one slams the ship sideways, and the stew responds with a mighty splash. You duck just in time to avoid a faceful of broth. It lands instead on the wall, the bench, and, tragically, your sock. Great. You grab a rope and tie the pot's handle to a hook on the stove. A little insurance. Not that rope has ever stopped soup before, but it makes you feel better. The galley smells like wet wood and salt and something vaguely herbal. The cook left behind a handful of seaweed, dry, crinkly stuff meant for seasoning, or teeth cleaning, or warding off evil spirits. Uses vary. You toss a pinch in. It vanishes instantly. Either absorbed, dissolved, or offended. Outside, thunder booms, and a streak of lightning flashes through the small hatch window. It lights the galley for a split second, revealing a world of warped beams and swaying shadows. For just a moment, the soup glows, then darkness again. The ship creaks. A bowl slides off a shelf and shatters. You don't even flinch. At this point, your soup hardened one of the younger crew ducks into the galley, soaked to the bone and shivering. He glances at the pot. Is it ready? You ladle out a scoop into a tin cup. He takes it, sniffs, then sips. His shoulders relax slightly. It's warm, he says. That's all I need. And really, that's the heart of it. On nights like this, when nothing is dry, and no one is well rested, and the ocean seems personally offended by your existence, a hot cup of anything feels like a miracle. The storm groans louder. The ship tilts again. This time you move with it, like you've grown sea legs just for soup service. The pot teeters, but you're ready. One hand on the handle, one eye on the surface, ladle held like a sword. This is your battlefield. A lesser-known tidbit about pirate cuisine? Stew was sometimes recycled for days. Left simmering in the pot between meals, new ingredients added as available, old ones left to melt into the broth. This perpetual stew was a kind of comfort, and sometimes a horror. A spoonful could contain yesterday's beans, last week's salted pork, and a memory of someone else's shoe if things got messy. You stir gently, letting the rhythm of the ladle distract you. One turn clockwise. Pause. One turn back. You think you see a carrot, but it disappears too quickly to confirm. Another crew member shows up, a grizzled old deckhand with scars on his fingers and sea in his eyes. He doesn't speak, just holds out his cup. You fill it. He nods. You nod. Soup diplomacy. Then the inevitable happens. A particularly violent lurch. A rogue wave. The ship shudders, and the pot jumps. It rises. You reach out, adrenaline kicking in, and grab at midair like a clumsy trapeze act. The soup splashes, hot and angry, but you hold firm. The rope helps. The gods, and perhaps the seaweed spirit, smile on you. The pot lands with a clunk. Half the stew is still inside. You stare at it, panting. Then you laugh. The cook returns just in time to see you standing, hair askew, soup on your sleeve, triumph in your eyes. Did it float off again? Almost, you say, and ladle out 2 more servings like it's the easiest thing in the world. Soup in this weather is never simple. But tonight you win, and your sock, tragically, will never recover. The heat hits you first, thick and wet like a wool blanket dunked in soup. You wipe your brow for the 3rd time this minute and glance at the tiny galley fire, which seems determined to double as both your stove and your sauna. Outside there's no storm for once. Just the endless shimmer of the equator sun pressing down like a judgment. This, you learn quickly, is the other kind of pirate cooking hell. No thunder, no crashing waves, just stillness, sweat, and the slow-cooked madness of trying to boil anything when the whole world already feels half-cooked. The ship creaks lazily under you, basking in the heat like a dozing cat. The sails hang limp. The air doesn't move. Even the breeze has given up. Inside the galley, the fire burns low, but somehow still manages to make your shirt cling to you like wet parchment. You stir a pot of rice with a half-melted spoon. The cook beside you is shirtless and glistening like a salted ham. He's not even bothering with words today. Just grunts and the occasional sigh, the universal pirate language for, "If we eat, we eat. If not, well, the beans weren't that exciting anyway." Humidity is everywhere. It beads on your nose, clings to your hair, and turns every surface slick. The deck above groans with every footstep, wood swelling, ropes tightening, everything sticky and strange. This isn't storm cooking. This is endurance cooking. A slow bake under a sky so bright it hurts to look at. The real issue? Everything spoils. Fast. Salted meat sweats in the barrels. Bread goes soft, then green, then suspiciously furry. Even the hardtack, long known for its invincibility, starts growing things no biscuit should. You open a bag of beans and find weevils having a party. You sigh and start picking them out with a knife. They're small, and some of the crews say they add crunch. Historians still debate how pirate ships handled food rot in tropical conditions. Some think they used more vinegar, soaking everything to keep it from turning. Others argue that most of the time, pirates just ate around the mold and hoped their stomachs were tougher than nature. A few lucky ships caught wind of preservation tricks from foreign ports: pickled mango, fermented fish paste, dried fruit sealed in wax. But for the average crew, it was salt, salt, and more salt, with a side of denial. You push the rice pot further from the fire and wipe your hands on your shirt, pointless, as the sweat returns instantly. The galley air is hot enough to stew you. You step to the barrel shelf and check the vinegar jug. Still half full. Thank Neptune. You splash some into the rice, just enough to slow whatever is growing in it. Then you toss in a few scraps of dried fish. It curls as it hits the heat, hissing like it disapproves. You understand the feeling. Outside, someone thumps down the stairs, flinging the door open with a bang. A gust of hotter air rolls in. Still nothing from the wind? You ask. The sailor shakes his head. Dead calm. Seas like glass. He grabs a cup of water, well, mostly water, and downs it with a grimace. You don't ask why. You already know. The barrels are getting low, and rainwater hasn't fallen in days. Soon, someone will suggest grog again, water cut with vinegar and the tiniest bit of rum to kill the taste. You ladle out the rice-fish concoction and pass it to the cook. He chews slowly, nods once, and hands you a strip of jerked goat meat that tastes more like rope than protein. You chew. It gives in eventually. Remember when we had lemons? He asks. You do. Briefly. Glorious yellow things, rolled across the deck during one glorious week after raiding a Spanish merchant ship. The crew smiled more. The food tasted less like sweat. The rats even looked healthier. Now it's back to the usual: hot, sticky, and sour in all the wrong ways. You mop the floor half-heartedly, not to clean it, but to prevent slipping on your own condensation. The galley smells like old vinegar, smoked fish, and damp boots. The herbs hanging from the ceiling have wilted into limp streamers. There's a silence that settles over the ship during days like this. No shouting, no singing, just the occasional slap of bare feet and the creak of stretched rigging. Even the gulls stay away. Nothing wants to fly in this heat, except maybe your patience. The cook points to the beans again. You scoop another batch. They look the same, but you swear they're growing tails. You add extra vinegar this time and a clove of garlic, so old it's more wood than bulb. Another sailor comes in, shirt tied around his head like a pirate turban. Is it soup again? Rice stew. You say. He groans but takes the bowl. Tastes like wet laundry, he mutters. But he finishes it. You don't take it personally. Wet laundry is still food, technically. One of the weirdest things about equatorial cooking? Time. The days drag, but meals always feel rushed. Maybe it's because everyone's irritable. Maybe it's because ingredients don't stay recognizable for long. Or maybe it's just the heat. It bakes time as much as bread. You stack the empty bowls, wipe the ladle clean, and sit for a moment on the crate marked tobacco, which hasn't held tobacco in months. Your back sticks to it instantly. The ship rocks gently, almost dreamily. There's no wind, no urgency. Just sun, and heat, and food that might have been fresh once. You close your eyes for a moment and picture a storm. Cold rain. Chilled wind. A fire that doesn't make you sweat through your socks. and then the door creaks open again. The cook tosses you a small lump of dried fruit from some forgotten stash. Bonus today, he grins. Don't say I never feed you like royalty. You bite into it. It's sweet. Sharp. Probably older than you are. Still, in this heat, it's magic. You're not sure what's worse, the smell or the squish. Tonight, your hammock, your one sacred place of soggy refuge, has become a casualty of the galley. Specifically, the greasy mess that somehow found its way from the stew pot to your sleeping quarters. You stare at it now, a glistening stain creeping across the canvas like a slow, fat slug of disappointment. Cooking on a pirate ship doesn't respect boundaries. It doesn't care that hammocks are supposed to be for sleeping, or that boots are not bowls, or that the underside of a storage bench shouldn't be slick with bacon drippings. Fire, fat, and gravity do as they please. You poke the hammock gingerly. It squelches. There's no salvaging it tonight. Sorry, the cook says, clearly not sorry. That grease bucket tipped again. Was gonna tell you. You sigh, not because it helps, but because you've run out of swear words that don't involve invoking sea monsters. Grease on a pirate ship is both a curse and a lifeline. It's used for everything: frying fish, slicking pans, sealing wooden joints, lubing rusty hinges, and occasionally quieting squeaky rats. Whether intentionally or not remains unclear. It's stored in barrels, jars, cups, and once, someone's hat, which was never quite the same afterward. The problem is that grease moves. It oozes. And on a swaying ship, it follows no laws of physics known to man. One moment it's secure in a jar, the next it's snaking its way through floorboards, up ropes, across hammocks. You, unfortunately, are just the latest victim. You drag your greasy bedding to the deck, hoping the night breeze will do something. Anything. A rat sniffs it, recoils, and leaves. Not a good sign. Inside the galley, the source of the disaster is clear. A cracked clay pot, once home to lard, now lies in pieces near the corner, its former contents painting a slow spiral across the planks. You step over it carefully. The floor is more slippery than usual, and you don't want to repeat the last week's incident, when Jenkins the quartermaster slipped during grog duty and ended up with soup in his ear. Historians still debate whether pirate cooks used animal fat purely for cooking, or if it played a larger role in general ship maintenance. Some logs suggest pork drippings were smeared on ropes to keep them supple. Others say it was used to polish boots or waterproof tunics. Either way, once grease escaped its container, there was no reclaiming it. The cook is scraping the pan with the same resolve usually reserved for tattoo removal. You watch as he gathers a thick, golden smear and dumps it into a repurposed lantern casing. Still good, he mutters. You say nothing. You're too busy trying to unslick your fingers with an already greased rag. It's like trying to dry off using a fish. At least the fire's still going. A small comfort. The pot above it bubbles, hissing gently as some nameless stew cooks down into what might eventually resemble food. There's a faint sweetness in the air, molasses, maybe. Or overripe plantains, depending on what was found in the last captured cargo. You fish out a wooden spoon and stir. Bits of onion, something meaty, and a thin layer of oil swirl together. You squint. Is that cinnamon? You didn't add cinnamon. But then again, this is pirate cuisine. Whatever goes in the pot is fair game, even if it started as medicine, livestock feed, or a festive ship decoration. You grab a crust of bread from the bench, tear it in half, and use it to soak up some of the slick from your fingers. It works. Sort of. You eat the rest without thinking, mostly because it's edible and you're tired. The hammock, meanwhile, is now hanging limply from the mast, swaying like a sad flag of surrender. You'll have to sleep in your coat tonight. Again, another sailor wanders into the galley, sniffing. "Smells like something good died in here," he says. "Just soup," you reply, too tired to defend it. He points at the glistening floor and raises an eyebrow. "Grease?" You nod. "It's making a run for it." He grunts and walks off, shoes squeaking with every step. That's the other thing about grease, it travels. And once it's in the treads of boots, it becomes everyone's problem. By midnight, the pot is ready. You ladle out portions carefully, wiping the rim of each bowl to avoid flare-ups. Hot grease and a tilting ship make for unpredictable mealtimes. The crew files in slowly, drawn by hunger and the promise of warmth. Most don't ask what's in the stew. They just eat. A few dunk bread into the shimmering broth. One sailor adds dried peppers from his personal stash, transforming his bowl into something volcanic. He sweats through it proudly. You take a bowl for yourself and settle onto a crate, legs sticky, shirt stained, eyes heavy. The galley hums with low chatter. The cook hands you a cloth for your hands, already oily, of course. You use it anyway. Fringe journals from the era-mentioned pirate ships smelling of meat, salt, and fat so deeply ingrained it could not be removed by fire nor prayer. Sitting here now, you believe it. There's no escaping it. The grease is in your sleeves, your socks, probably your dreams. But the soup is good. Genuinely good. Rich, warm, hearty. It slides down like melted comfort. You exhale, feeling your limbs loosen for the first time all day. Your hammock may be a casualty. Your boots may be skates. But for now, your belly is full, the fire is crackling, and nobody's on fire. Call it a win. You wake to the unmistakable sound of something metal clanging against wood, followed by a slow, wet plop. You sit up, groggy and still slightly slick from last night's grease incident, and immediately sense the problem. The pot is gone. More specifically, the big stew pot. The one you and the cook fought to keep upright during a week of squalls, the one that survived fire mishaps, bean explosions, and that time Jenkins tried to wash it with sand and made it worse, has disappeared. You blink. Rub your eyes. Stumble toward the galley on bare feet that stick slightly with each step. The cook is already there, crouching in disbelief before a vacant stove and a few guilty-looking carrot ends. "Did it walk off?" you mutter. "More like floated off," he replies, gesturing toward the open hatch and the narrow trail of broth glistening like a breadcrumb path. You follow the evidence. The pot, it turns out, did not leap into the sea for freedom. It merely tipped during the night's unexpected roll and went sloshing merrily across the deck until someone, likely Jenkins, again, left the galley hatch open. From there, it went exploring. You find it wedged behind a barrel of nails and something labeled Buttons, Spanish, upside down and slightly dented, still dripping last night's stew. A lone pea rolls past your foot. Rescuing the pot is not elegant. It requires rope, awkward angles, and the cook standing behind you mumbling. "Careful, that's the good pot." But you manage. It's heavy, awkward, and still steaming faintly, though you're unsure if that's heat or your imagination. Back in the galley, you scrub it out. Again. It's the third deep clean this week, and the fourth if you count the time someone tried to cook crab in it and forgot to remove the shell first. Now, with the pot somewhat restored, the cook stares into it like it betrayed him. "That's the last of the barley gone," he mutters. You nod solemnly. "And half the pork." He picks up a weevil-riddled hardtack and examines it with suspicion. "This might be soup now." Pirate life wasn't designed for kitchen accidents, but they happened anyway. Historians still argue whether ships kept backup cookware or if the communal pot was simply too valuable to lose. Some ships likely carried a spare or two, looted from merchant vessels or purchased in port. But on many pirate ships, the pot was as much a centerpiece of daily life as the sails or the gunpowder. A good stew pot meant meals. Hot food. a semblance of structure. Without it, dinner became dry beans, raw salted fish, or worse, navy biscuits soaked in water and flavored with bitterness. The cook reaches into a bag and pulls out a gnarled root. Yam? He offers. You shrug. Why not? It's not floating away yet. Tonight's meal is a recovery job. You scrounge 3 yams, 1 soft, a bit of preserved onion, the end of a dried pepper string, and something pickled in a bottle without a label. It's green. That's all you know. The fire, mercifully, cooperates. You coax it into a low simmer. No aggressive boiling. You can't risk another escape. You tie the pot to the stove this time, twice. 1 loop around the handle, 1 around the base. Then you wedge it in with spare bricks and mutter a short prayer to Saint Anchovy, patron of shipboard cooks. Unofficial, but respected. Outside, the ocean is glassy and unbothered. No wind. No waves. Just an eerie quiet that makes you half suspect the sea is plotting something again. You stir the new stew. It smells promising. The cook adds a splash of vinegar, and the entire galley seems to relax. Fringe accounts from the 17th century describe how some crews treated the pot with reverence. Not because it was sacred, though after this week you're tempted, but because it was essential. 1 broken pot could cripple morale faster than any wound that a sailor steps in, still toweling off from a rinse with seawater. He sniffs the air and raises an eyebrow. Same stew? New stew, you say. Same pot. Barely. He peers into it. Smells less angry. You take that as a compliment. You serve dinner carefully, 1 tin at a time. No sudden movements. No tilting. The pot stays in place. The galley stays mostly clean. For once, nothing bursts, drips, or slides across the floor with a gleeful squelch. You eat sitting on a step, spoon in one hand, cup in the other. The stew is mild, earthy, and almost nice. The yams held up. The green thing adds a strange zing, but not a dangerous one. The hardtack, soaked in broth, no longer threatens dental disaster. The cook takes a second bowl. That's his way of saying you did well. Later, after everything's cleaned, you eye the pot, now lashed securely to the stove like a nervous goat. You pat it gently. Not tonight. You whisper. One of the younger crew wanders by and laughs. You talk to the pot now? You smile. Only when it misbehaves. He shrugs and keeps walking. He gets it. This floating pot, this clunky metal cauldron, it's not just cookware anymore. It's a member of the crew. One with a history, a scar or two, and the tendency to wander, and tonight, for once, it stays put. You're stirring porridge, again, when the cook vomits into a bucket for the second time that morning. To be fair, it's not his fault. The sea has been surly for days now, pitching and bucking like an offended goat, and no one's stomach has quite recovered. But it doesn't make the sight, or the sound, any easier to cook beside. You look away politely and keep stirring. The pot wobbles dangerously with every roll of the ship. Your legs spread wider for balance, your boots braced on planks that feel more like a wet seesaw than a floor. Welcome to life as a seasick cook. Or rather, the replacement cook, because the actual cook has turned the color of boiled cabbage and currently resembles a sad, swaying candle. He groans. You're doing fine. You are not. The spoon you're using has a crack. The porridge has too much salt. And there's something about the smell of oat mush and stomach acid swirling together in the galley that makes your own gut thoughtful. You force yourself to breathe through your mouth. A mistake. Now you can taste the air. Pirate ships didn't have a contingency plan for nausea. When the sea got violent, cooking didn't stop, it just got harder. Cooks had to anchor themselves to the floor, sometimes literally tying their waists to a beam or post so they didn't slide across the galley mid-stir. You consider it now, eyeing the rope hanging from the beam overhead. One more lurch and you're going to invent a new dance move called Death by Slippery Spoon. Historians still argue whether pirate ships had designated cooks or if the role rotated based on who had the least to vomit. Some accounts mention hired shipboard chefs, often former Navy men, or even captured cooks from raided ships, while others describe a loose rotation of anyone with a stomach strong enough to hold still and a hand steady enough to not burn the porridge. You're starting to suspect it was the latter. The porridge clings to the spoon like damp cement. You add water. Then more water. Then a pinch of what you think is nutmeg, though it could also be powdered chalk. The spice labels have long since faded, and smell is your only guide. A particularly rude wave slaps the hull, and the floor tilts hard to starboard. The pot slides. You lunge. Your spoon flies from your hand and lands with a sad splurt against the wall. The cook groans again. I think I saw my soul leave for a minute. You grab a second spoon. No time for philosophy. The porridge has gone from sticky to soupy to something in between. You stir faster. Not because it helps, but because you need to do something. One sailor sticks his head into the galley and immediately gags. Oh no, he says, backing out again. Still cooking. You shout after him. It's porridge! He mumbles something about betrayal in oat form, and disappears. You're down to your last nerve when a tiny miracle occurs. The cook lifts his head, takes a deep breath, and doesn't retch. Huh, he says. I think I've settled. You blink. You sure? He nods. Carefully. I might even taste it. You ladle out a cup and hand it to him, watching as he sips. He pauses, swishes, and then shrugs. It's warm, he says. That's enough. High praise under the circumstances. Another sailor arrives, looking slightly less green than the others. He takes a portion without complaint. You hand out a few more, grateful for the distraction. There's an art to feeding seasick pirates. Soft foods. Mild flavors. Nothing too greasy. And absolutely no fish. Not because it's bad, because even the smell can trigger a chain reaction that will have the whole deck heaving like a chorus of disgust. You learn that the hard way. Outside, the sea isn't calming, but you're getting used to it. Your body moves with the ship now, like a tired dance partner who knows every step by muscle memory. A fringe account from a Dutch privateer's log describes a cook who nailed the pot to the stove during storms, only to discover the nails weren't strong enough when the stew exploded mid-roll. No one was seriously injured, but they apparently found peas in their boots for weeks. You glance down at your own boots. Just salt, so far. And a hint of porridge. The cook, newly rehydrated, takes back the spoon. I've got it, he says. Go breathe outside. You don't argue. You climb up the hatch and onto the main deck, where the sky is moody and the waves still angry. But at least the air doesn't taste like hot oat regret. The crew is scattered, lounging miserably, ropes limp, shirts open. One man chews dry bread slowly, like it's offending him with each bite. Another leans over the rail in that unmistakable posture of defeat. You sit near the mast, bowl in hand. You taste the porridge. It's bland, a little salty, a little spicy, comfort food for the chronically seasick. Not bad. Not great. But warm. And it stays down. And that's all anyone really wants right now. By the end of the day, the pot is empty. The cook is upright. And no one has thrown up in at least an hour. In pirate life, that's what they call a good day. You're elbow deep in a barrel, digging for something edible, when you taste it again. Salt. Not the good kind. Not the sprinkle on a roast, rim your mug, make your mouth water kind. No. This is everything is salt. Salt in your fingernails. Salt in your hair. Salt in your soul. It clings to everything. The beef, the biscuits, the beans. Even the apples you looted a week ago now taste like salted disappointment. You pull one from the bottom of the barrel, give it a hopeful sniff, and then sigh. It smells like pickled regret. You hand it to the cook, who shrugs and chucks it into the pot. At this point, if it doesn't bite back, it's dinner. The truth is, fresh water is low. Again. Which means cooking with seawater. Again. You'd think being surrounded by ocean would make that easier, but salty water doesn't play nice with food. It boils differently. It seasons like a drunken sailor, too much in all the wrong places. And worse, it makes everything taste the same. Salty. Dry. Bland but biting. Somehow, all at once, the cook stirs the pot slowly. It's stew again. Always stew. This one features whatever's left from last week's raid, some salted cod, weevil-riddled flour, and a few unidentifiable lumps that might be potato or might be something braver. You sure this water was from the top barrel? You ask. He pauses. It was water adjacent. You stare. He grins. Pirate ships often relied on rainwater, caught in canvas sails or makeshift funnels, funneled into barrels that were, let's be honest, probably already half full of bugs. When the rain stopped, the rum started. Or, more commonly, grog, a cursed little blend of water, vinegar, and just enough rum to convince you the water wasn't trying to kill you. Historians still debate who first mixed vinegar into grog. Some say it was a naval tradition to combat scurvy. Others argue it was just a desperate cook trying to mask the taste of mildew and algae. Either way, pirates inherited the habit and rarely improved it. You sip from a mug of the current grog batch and wince. It's like drinking sadness. But it hydrates. Probably. Tonight's stew bubbles ominously. You grab a ladle and stir. It's thick, grayish, and smells like someone boiled laundry in fish sauce. A good sign, oddly enough. It means it's done. A sailor pokes his head into the galley. It dinner yet? Define dinner. You say. He enters anyway, holding out his dented bowl like a church offering. You serve him a scoop. It thuds. He sniffs it. Extra salt today. Chef's curse. He nods solemnly and retreats. You serve more. The line builds. One by one, the crew arrives, bowls in hand, expressions hopeful but wary. The stew is hot. That's about the best thing it has going for it. Still, there's something comforting about this nightly routine. Same pot. Same faces. Same complaints. You find your rhythm in the ladling, in the passing of food, in the shouts of, "Mind the bones!" and, "Hey, this one's chewy!" The cook sits beside you, finally off his feet. He sips his mug. "I miss real water." You glance at him. "Rain's coming. I can smell it." He snorts. "That's just Jenkins. He hasn't bathed since Port Royal." You both laugh, and for a moment the salt doesn't matter. The smell fades. The grog tastes less like punishment. You pass him a chunk of bread, torn from the last dry loaf. He dips it into the stew and eats slowly. You do the same. The stew is, miraculously, edible. The salt almost works. Almost. Fringe journals from Portuguese traders mention pirates trading for citrus and clean water, sometimes bartering away gunpowder for just a few barrels of sweet, unsalted relief. Other accounts suggest pirate ships carried glass jugs of fresh water in captain's quarters, reserved only for wounded crew or, more likely, the captain himself. You drink from the grog barrel like everyone else. Occasionally you swish it with a sprig of mint. If you can find mint. Or weeds that vaguely resemble mint. Anything green and not immediately lethal. Outside, the sky is darkening. A breeze picks up, sharp with promise. Rain. Maybe. Soon, you rise and check the sail funnels, unfolding the canvas and setting out barrels just in case. If the storm comes, you'll catch a fresh gallon or two. Enough to soak beans, rinse the pot, maybe even scrub your socks. A luxury trifecta. Below deck, the crew eats quietly. The grog flows. Someone plays a slow, wheezy tune on a busted flute. You return to the galley and begin scrubbing the pot. Salt crust clings to the bottom like barnacles to a hull. You scrape, soak, and curse in rhythm. The cook yawns. When we get to land, I want a cup of cold river water. No vinegar. No fishy aftertaste. Just clear and boring. You nod. And bread. Real bread. With butter, he adds. You both fall silent, dreaming of a meal that doesn't crunch from sea salt or fizz with whatever's fermenting in the corner. You hang the ladle. Wipe your hands. Sit by the open hatch and breathe. Outside, the first drop hits your cheek. Rain. You shout, the cook scrambles, and within seconds you're both dancing like fools with buckets and barrels and broken helmets, catching every drop like treasure. Water. Real water.no salt. No grog. No vinegar. Just rain. And for the first time in weeks, dinner might taste like something other than the ocean. 50 mouths to feed. One fire. You blink at the pot. Then at the crew lined up outside the galley door like barnacles waiting their turn. You rub your neck. It's going to be one of those nights. The ship's been becalmed for 2 days, drifting lazily beneath a blistering sun, and now everyone's hungry. Not just hungry, irritable. Food is the only real entertainment left. No loot, no land, no wind, and certainly no card games since someone stole the dice and used them as drawer stoppers. You have one fire. One pot. And somehow, you're expected to transform this into a feast.no pressure. You glance over the available ingredients: a half bag of beans, a few onions that have sprouted hopeful green tops, 3 small slabs of salted pork, and something that may or may not have been cabbage in a former life. You decide not to ask questions. The fire, at least, is behaving, burning steadily beneath the stove with a quiet crackle, like it knows how much you need this to go well. You begin, as always, with the beans. A bucket of seawater is waiting. You hesitate, then toss in a palmful of clean ashes, not because it helps flavor, but because the cook swears it does something to neutralize the gut thunder. Whether that's superstition or fringe science, no one's brave enough to skip the step. Historians still argue whether pirates really ate communally at every meal, or if some ships devolved into first come, first serve chaos. There's evidence both ways. Some journals describe fair portions and shared bowls, while others recount fistfights over the last scoop of soup or thefts that ended with someone being tied to the mast. Without dinner, you stir slowly. One pot. That's the limit. You don't get a second chance. No multiple burners. No batch cooking. Just this. Whatever goes and must be able to stretch across 50 weary stomachs without riots. And here's the trick, you bulk it up. Bread crusts. Extra water. A handful of dried peas. A sprinkle of flour stolen from the weevil barrel, sifted, of course. You find a single carrot stub rolling under the bench and drop it in like a precious jewel. The cook joins you with the pork, slicing it thin, almost translucent. Not because he's stingy, because he's smart. Thin cuts look like more. And when they float, they create the illusion of bounty. Pirate food was as much psychology as it was sustenance. You add the onions. A few herbs, dried thyme, probably. Could be dried moss. Hard to tell. A splash of grog for flavor. A rogue clove of garlic you found wedged behind a crate. The smell begins to rise, earthy, warm, almost pleasant. Outside, the crew waits. The first few peek in, sniffing, offering bowls and hopeful looks. You ladle the first scoop into a dented tin and hand it off. They don't thank you. Just shuffle off like satisfied ghosts. The queue moves slowly. One bowl at a time. You dip carefully, avoiding the bottom of the pot. No one wants the burned bits yet. That's for the cook and whoever's on galley duty. Someone groans from the end of the line. Is it just soup again? You glance up. It's stew if you close your eyes. The cook smirks. Another sailor slaps the side of the doorway and mutters, better than rat. They're not wrong. Technically, it's edible. It's warm. And no one's been sick this week, which is a minor miracle. As the pot empties, you adjust the ladle angle. Tilt it just right so the liquid stretches. A thin slice of pork floats by. You nudge it toward the next bowl, like you're dealing cards. Another sailor appears, hat crooked, teeth already biting the edge of his spoon. Is this the spicy one? You blink. Define spicy. He shrugs and eats it anyway. That's the spirit. By the last few bowls, the contents are more hope than stew, floating onions, pork crumbs, and a few heroic beans clinging to each other for warmth. Still, no one complains. They know the rules. Point one fire. One pot. One chance. Fringe accounts from merchant journals suggest pirates actually had better food than naval crews. Not more necessarily, but less formal structure meant they could loot, trade, and improvise. Spices from captured ships, dried fruit from raided towns, even coconut milk on tropical islands. But in between those jackpots? It was nights like this. Thin stew. Shared spoons. Quiet chewing. The pot is scraped clean. The last bit is poured into a cracked cup for Jenkins, who always seems to be last. You wipe your hands on your apron, a converted sailcloth, and lean back against the bench. Silence. Not total silence. The ship still creaks, waves lap gently, someone coughs from the bunk room, but the complaint silence. No one hated it enough to mutiny. Silence. You exhale. Success. The cook pours 2 small bowls from a hidden stash. Yours has more pork. His has the burned bottom bits. Earned it, he mutters. You clink spoons, pirate cheers, and eat. It's salty. Mostly bean. But somehow, good. Maybe it's the fire. Maybe it's the rhythm. Maybe it's just knowing that for tonight, everyone got fed. You stretch your back and feel something pop. Probably your spine's way of applauding. 50 mouths. One fire. Still standing, you wash the pot, again. Tie it down, again. And settle into the corner with the faintest satisfaction. Not bad for one pot and a dream. You know that smell. That sharp, nose-wrinkling stench that slinks into your nostrils before your brain even fully wakes up. Something's gone off. You sit up slowly, blinking into the dim morning light leaking through the hatch above. The cook's already in the galley, poking suspiciously at a sack of potatoes that, judging by the squish, has committed treason. One of them rolls out onto the deck, trailing a long, translucent sprout and the kind of odor that makes your eyes water. You step around it like it might explode. We've lost another bag, the cook says grimly. Might have taken the onions with it. You sigh and lift the nearest barrel lid, only to be met with the unmistakable scent of decay mixed with brine. The pork is turning. And not in a delicious, dry-aged way. Pirate ships had no refrigeration. Food preservation was a gamble, even in the best weather. In the damp, salty, shifting climate of the open sea? It was warfare. Salted meat held out for a while. Dried beans kept longer. But vegetables, fruit, even ship's biscuits, they all had a breaking point. And today you've hit yours. The cook gestures at the ruined potato and makes a half-hearted joke. We could weaponize this. You nudge it into a bucket. I think it already has a kill count. You sort through the barrels with hope and regret in equal measure. The flour has gone clumpy. The rice smells faintly of mildew. And the dried fruit? Moldy. How does something dry grow mold? You don't ask. You just toss it overboard and try not to picture the fish below developing strange cravings for prunes. Tonight's menu? A delicate blend of what's left and what hasn't betrayed us. Historians still argue about the average shelf life of shipboard rations in pirate fleets. Some logs speak of surprisingly well-preserved cargo thanks to sealed wax jars or rum brine barrels. Others, more common, describe entire weeks where the crew survived on little more than biscuit crumbs, soup from bones, and whatever unlucky bird landed on deck. You once heard about a ship that roasted rats with wild herbs when food ran low. You're not there yet, but Jenkins is looking at the rats funny again. I in the galley, you improvise. The last of the onions still firm, some of the still sweet plantains from the last shore run, and surprise, an old jar of chickpeas that somehow avoided both rot and rats. You slice and stir with a sense of purpose. Not quite confident, but committed. The cook handles the meat, what's left of it, anyway, trimming the questionable bits and dousing the rest in vinegar. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Pickling buys us a few hours. You nod. Pickling buys us plausible deniability. There's something almost noble about saving a meal from disaster. You've done it before. You'll do it again. But each time, it feels like gambling with stomachs. You start the fire. Small, steady. The galley fills with the scent of hot oil and sizzling onion. Better. A few curious noses peek through the hatchway. That's always a good sign. The cook adds the plantains, letting them caramelize, then stirs in the chickpeas and a bit of the mystery spice from the cracked jar labeled. You've learned not to question it. The meat, once cooked, is chopped fine. You'll tell the crew it's seasoned pork. They'll believe you. Probably. As everything simmers together, you add a final touch, a splash of grog. Not just for flavor, but for confidence. The pot sizzles. The smell, miraculously, is good. Savory, sweet, sharp around the edges, like a memory of real food. Fringe pirate diaries mention something called panic stew, a last-ditch meal made from whatever wouldn't kill you outright. Beans, old biscuits, brine-soaked lemons, fish scraps. Some say those stews were better than the usual fare. Others say they just made you forget how bad the usual fare was. You ladle out the stew, if you can call it that, and serve the crew, one bowl at a time. No one asks questions. Not a single. What's in this? Which is either a compliment or a warning. The cook watches them eat, arms folded. Think we've pulled it off? You nod. If no one dies in the next 2 hours, I'm calling it a win. One sailor finishes his bowl, wipes his mouth, and grins. Tastes like someone put effort into it. You all right? You smile faintly. Bit offended, but I'll take it. Another sailor leans into the galley and taps the bucket with the dead potato. We having this tomorrow? The cook throws a rag at him. That's dessert. The laughter helps. The warm food helps more. Later, as you scrub the pot again, you can't help but admire it, dented, scorched, stained with history, but still your most reliable crewmate. It survived another meal, another mystery, another mutiny by mold, and you? You're still standing, well, swaying slightly. But that counts. The fire is dead. Again, you crouch in the corner of the galley, poking the ash with a spoon like it personally insulted you. It's not just dead, it's gone. No ember, no glow, no hopeful puff of warmth. just cold gray dust and the faint smell of charred disappointment. This is the third time this week. You glance around for the flint box. It's missing. Of course. Probably borrowed by Jenkins to light his pipe or wedge his bunk door shut. You make a mental note to feed him nothing but dry biscuit tonight. Without fire, you're stuck. The stew's half cooked, the pot's cold, and the cook, currently recovering from last night's grog experiment, is nowhere in sight. You mutter a very soft pirate curse under your breath and start rooting through crates. On a pirate ship, fire wasn't just warmth, it was power. It was dinner. It was morale. Without it, the entire crew would slip into foul moods, fistfights, and wild, rum-fueled rumors about mutiny. No one liked cold food. And no one trusted a galley that didn't smell like smoke. You find the flint in the shoe of the cabin boy. Why? You don't ask. You just take it back and get to work. But here's the thing. Lighting a fire on a ship isn't like striking a cozy hearth in a tavern. There's wind. There's damp. There's rope everywhere waiting to catch fire. And the stove itself, cleverly built into the ship's deck, is just a stone box with an attitude problem. You strike once. Twice. A spark flares, then dies. You blow gently. Nothing. You try again. This time with kindling from an old rum crate and the patience of a monk. A few glowing specks. A faint curl of smoke. You lean in. Come on, you whisper. Just a little, a flicker. A flame. And finally, life. You sit back, triumphant, smelling like sweat, soot, and stubbornness. But the fire still isn't hot enough. It'll take time to coax it back into cooking strength. That's when the lookout calls down. Sail off the starboard. You blink. Merchant? Maybe, comes the answer. Big sails. Look slow. You glance at the pot, half filled with what could be stew or could be failure, then back toward the hatch. Raiding for food wasn't uncommon. When the ship's stores ran low, pirates didn't just hunt gold, they hunted supplies. Firewood, spices, salted meats, even dried fruit if they were lucky. Some ships were targeted not for their treasure chests, but their galley goods. Fringe accounts suggest some pirate crews prioritized raiding fishing vessels over merchant galleons, not for their money, but for fresh fish and oil, things that couldn't be stolen from a dockside tavern. You run to the deck. The ship in question is closer now. Low in the water. Wide sails. Definitely not a warship. The captain squints, lowers his spyglass, and grins. Looks like a pantry on water. Ready the longboat. 20 minutes later, you're back with 2 sacks of onions, a crate of flatbread, 6 cured hams, and, miraculously, 2 boxes of charcoal. Glorious, dry, fire-hungry charcoal. You throw it into the stove like it's gold. The fire roars. You and the cook get to work fast. The stew gets a reboot: chopped ham, fresh onion, a fistful of something that might be cumin or might be sawdust. Either way, it smells right. You toss in the old beans, a splash of vinegar, and, what the heck, half a bottle of pilfered olive oil. It bubbles like it missed you. The crew gathers before the smell even finishes rising. Sailors lounge near the galley, bowls in hand, eyes half shut in anticipation. No one's grumbling. Even Jenkins looks happy, though that might just be because you haven't mentioned the flint box yet. You serve the stew with flatbread, real flatbread, not dried biscuits pretending to be edible. The mood shifts tangibly. Laughter returns. Someone sings a few bars of a drinking song, slightly off-key but heartfelt. You sit with your bowl, watching the fire flicker. The charcoal gives it depth, a warm, steady heat that doesn't bite or fade. You wonder how long it will last. The cook sighs. This might be the best meal we've had in a month. You nod. Thanks to borrowed flame. He grins. Borrowed? Please! They gave it to us. You both know that's not true, but it sounds better. Historians still debate whether pirate raids prioritized food, or if supplies were simply the bonus after coins and goods. But dozens of logs suggest a pattern: sick crews stealing lemons, ships looted solely for cheese. Even one infamous raid that netted nothing but 3 barrels of flour and a goat. You're not above it. Fire and food come before pride. Later that night, as the flames die low and the pot sits empty, you press a warm spoon against your lips and smile. You didn't just cook tonight. You conquered. With a little flame, a bit of theft, and a lot of luck, you fed the ship. You held the peace. And no one will know just how close they came to another night of cold stew and mutiny. The crew is quiet tonight. Not the good kind of quiet either. Not the everyone's full and sleepy sort. No. This is the eerie, simmering silence that means something went wrong. You stir the pot slower than usual, partly because you're out of things to add, and partly because the crew's superstition is starting to rub off on you. It began this morning, when a gull flew into the galley and dropped a dead fish onto the stove. The cook stared at it like it had insulted his mother. That's a sign, he muttered. An omen. You offered to cook the fish. He didn't laugh. By midday, someone spilled salt. Then a rope snapped and nearly took out Jenkins again. Then the fire sputtered and went out twice, with no wind, no rain, no explanation. Just gone. Cold. Now, every bowl you serve gets a wary look and a muttered blessing. No one's saying it, but they all feel it. The ship is cursed. Or at least dinner is. You don't believe in sea curses. Not really. But the stew is blackened at the edges, and it did bubble when no one was stirring it. Still, food must be made. Hunger is more powerful than fear. And pirates, for all their bluster, will risk a ghost if it means a hot meal. You scrape the sides of the pot and salvage what you can. A few chunks of yam, one wilted cabbage leaf, some dried beef that now looks like something you'd find nailed to a tavern wall. Into the fire it goes. The crew watches. No one speaks. A few men make strange gestures, fingers crossed, hands on hearts, a coin pressed to the forehead. You just keep cooking. Historians still argue how seriously pirates took superstitions. Some journals dismiss them as tavern tales, while others describe entire crews refusing to sail on Fridays or tossing silver coins overboard to appease the sea. Your crew? They don't joke when the wind dies and the stew boils too loud. Fringe tales speak of burned offerings to Neptune, scraps of meat tossed into the ocean during stormy weeks, or entire meals left uneaten and pushed overboard with muttered apologies. Not out of generosity. Out of fear. You remember hearing about a ship that fed their best roast to the sea god during a lightning storm. 2 days later, they made port safely. Coincidence? Maybe. But no one argues with a coincidence that saves your life. You ladle a bowl of stew. It steams thick and rich, but a little darker than usual. You taste it. Smoky. Not bad, but it coats your tongue in a strange way. You hand it to the captain. He doesn't flinch. Just takes it, nods once, and eats. The tension breaks slightly. A few others step forward. Jenkins blesses his bowl out loud. Another sailor dips his spoon, whispers something, and tosses the first bite overboard. A tax to the sea. You watch it splash and disappear. By the end of the meal, the pot is empty. The crew is fed. No one died. No one screamed. But they're still quiet. You start scrubbing the pot. Again. The soot is worse than usual. The fire burned oddly hot tonight, like it was trying to burn away something besides food. The cook joins you. He doesn't speak, just rinses bowls and listens to the ocean lapping below. You think we're cursed? You ask finally. He shrugs. We're pirates. We're always cursed. You laugh softly. It helps. As the moon rises and the stars appear, the crew begins to relax. Someone tunes a broken mandolin. Someone else snores, loud and wet. You finish cleaning the pot and tie it down for the night, just in case. The cook sits beside you with a half bowl of grog. If Neptune liked the stew, he says, raising it like a toast, he can bloody well finish the dishes next time. You clink mugs. To burned offerings. The galley smells faintly of smoke and superstition. The sea is calm. For now, you crawl into your hammock, the motion of the ship rocking you like a cradle. Maybe you are cursed. Maybe you're just tired. Either way, the stew didn't kill anyone, and that's a victory. The sky is black, not dark. Black. A total, starless canopy, heavy with storm clouds that have been creeping in since dusk. You can smell the rain before you see it. You can feel the air pressing against your skin like the ocean's holding its breath. And somewhere below that ominous sky, you're trying to boil rice. It's not going well. The fire keeps sputtering. The wind is coming through the galley like a drunk knocking over furniture. Everything is damp, including the matches, your sleeves, and probably your soul. The cook is elsewhere, battening hatches or securing barrels or possibly hiding under a blanket. You're on your own. And of course, tonight had to be rice night. Rice takes patience. Attention. Heat that's consistent. You have none of those things right now. You clutch the pot in one hand and brace your knees against the bench as the ship lurches. Outside, thunder growls. Lightning flashes. The kind that turns every wet rope into a glowing line of potential disaster. Pirates didn't usually eat well during storms. Most meals were cold, skipped, or replaced with dried biscuit and prayer. But tonight, something about the tension has made the crew restless, edgy. They want a meal. Something hot. Something human. And so you promise them rice. Historians still debate whether pirates cooked full meals during tempests or simply waited out the weather. But in some logs, rare, frayed, half-mad ones, there are descriptions of desperate cooks clinging to iron stoves, ladling broth with one hand while the ship rolled like a coin in the sea. You now understand why those logs were mad. Your fire dies again. You mutter every sailor's swear you know, mild ones only, in case Neptune is listening, and crouch down to relight it. The rice is wet but not cooked. The water sloshed out during the last pitch, and now it's a soggy half-mass of maybe food. You add more water. Try again. The pot hisses. You hiss back. Another wave hits. This one throws you halfway across the galley. The spoon goes flying. You land in a barrel of onions. You lie there a moment. Just breathing. Just reevaluating your life choices. And then you laugh. Not a big laugh. A quiet one. That slightly deranged chuckle of someone who knows the storm has won, but who is too stubborn to let it ruin dinner. You crawl back to the pot. The rice is, sort of working. The fire's back. And the storm, though loud, is not yet sinking the ship. You add dried fish. The last of the salted pork. Whatever green thing was hiding behind the barrel, you don't want to know. A splash of grog from morale. A handful of spice because flavor is hope. The result is a bubbling, oddly fragrant porridge. Warm, savory, and surprisingly edible. Lightning flashes again. This time, it's closer, you shout. If you want some, come down and get it! The crew laughs from above deck. It breaks the tension. Someone even cheers. They file in, one by one, dripping wet, bowls in hand. They hold onto the walls, knees bent, hands steady as they collect their rations. No one complains. Even Jenkins. You made hot food, the captain says, sipping his bowl like it's a toast. In this You nod. It's rice. He grins. It's a miracle. You finish feeding the last of them, then collapse into your corner, holding your own bowl. The galley creaks. The waves smash. But inside, for now, it's warm. Fringe accounts suggest pirates sometimes made offerings during storms, tossing food, coins, even a mug of grog overboard to calm the seas. You look at your bowl, then at the lightning beyond the hatch. You raise the bowl. Not this time. You whisper, you eat, the storm rages on. But you're fed. The crew is quiet. And the rice, against all odds, is good. The last meal in a lightning storm. Maybe not legendary, but memorable. The storm continues far above you now, distant thunder rolling like drums wrapped in velvet. But in the dark of the galley, everything is still. The fire has faded to embers. You can hear them crackle gently, tucked beneath the pot. They glow like sleepy coals, steady and low. The ship rocks softer now, no longer fighting the sea, but riding it. Like a cradle on a tide, you lean back against the wooden beam. The smell of rice and ash still lingers in the air. Your hands are warm. Your shoulders heavy in a good way, the kind of tired that feels earned. All around you, the crew sleeps. Hammocks sway. Spoons clink gently in empty bowls. A few soft snores. Nothing urgent. Nothing loud. You close your eyes and listen. The whisper of waves, the hum of the hull, the faint breath of a breeze through the hatch. You did it. Fires lit. Bellies filled. Storm survived. Let the sea rage. You've made peace with it. And maybe tomorrow, the sun will rise and the galley will be dry and the bread won't crumble like stone. Or maybe not. Either way, you'll be here, spoon in hand, pot on the stove, ready to feed them again. For now, just rest. Let the sea hold you. Let the wind hum your lullaby. Sleep, cooked out, you've earned it. The wind howls outside. The deck creaks. And you, ladle in hand, start to feel like maybe, just maybe, you could survive this kitchen after all.